Oh boy, what is going on, everybody? Falcon fans across the world, what is going on? Welcome to the 95 North Falcons Talk Show. I am your host, Berto. Yes, it has been a very long time since I've been on, but I'm glad to be back on with y'all, man. I definitely have missed every single one of you folks, man, that have supported me from day one, man. So let's jump right into it, man. We got the Atlanta Falcons now facing an offseason with a lot of questions on hand, mainly in the roster. On the offensive side, believe it or not, yes, there are questions on the offensive side of the ball with, an amazing turn of events that had happened in 2024 with our skill set players. Drake London, Darnell Mooney, both of those guys really exploded onto the scenes with Kirk Cousins at the beginning. And these guys really, showed the way for Atlanta in the playmaker setting of it all. And I'm extremely happy where that position is at currently, what the future of that wide receiver position looks like. We can even go down to the running back ranks, and this year, essentially, it showed to be that this is Bijan Robinson's team. This is Bijan Robinson's offense. Offense definitely goes through Bijan. And quote unquote, that is our unicorn on offense, not the much talked about tight end Kyle Pitts, who we are going to talk about in just a moment. But beforehand, let me just jump into the chat right quick and say what's up to some of the folks that are in. I got my brother Dwayne Ruffin out in sunny SoCal. What is going on? Good morning to you, brother. My brother A1 Forever Sports, Chris Tipmore, who is exploding onto the scene with some great content. Also, congratulations to you on the Media Digest gig that he picked up on. Salute to you, my brother, man. Hope all is well with you, man. But yes, as I mentioned, man, we got to talk about Kyle Pitts a little bit here, man. What should the Atlanta Falcons do this offseason with the much talked about Kyle Pitts, the aforementioned unicorn of this Falcons offense, to, to see what his career is going to be like in Atlanta moving forward? Is Atlanta going to keep him, point blank period, man? The Falcons right now in the salary cap world don't sit as well as most teams in the NFL. I believe the Falcons rank right around 27th, and we're negative 10, almost 11 million in salary cap right now. The most obvious choices are restructuring, cutting, extending, what have you not, certain players. But one guy comes into question, as mentioned, is Kyle Pitts, who holds a $10.5 million balance over the Falcons' head. Now, that contract can wash in one simple move if the Atlanta Falcons elect to trade Kyle Pitts. And as we looked into this 2024 season, we really felt like Kyle Pitts was going to be the ultimate factor or the ultimate X factor for this Falcons offense. But it really didn't manifest into that. We saw a lot of great things in training camp with Kirk Cousins and Kyle Pitts. We felt like a rapport was being had between the two, but it really didn't trickle over into the regular season. And that's where a lot of the questions started coming in the form of, what is Kyle Pitts to this Falcons offense? What does Kyle Pitts mean to Zach Robinson's scheme? And quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if Kyle Pitts is a true fit for this Falcons offense. We've seen in some games, Charlie Warner actually outsnap Kyle Pitts in that regard, and that's crazy to even think. The fourth overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft being, outsnapped by a backup tight end for most of his career. Albeit this is a guy that does it all for this Falcons offense in Charlie Warner. Really, Kyle Pitts just hasn't found his footing yet with this Falcons organization or with this Falcons scheme. Now, a lot of things could be spoken about, right? And shout out to everybody that has spoken about it. And quarterback play always, it's your bread and butter. You live and die by that in the skill set position. And with Kyle Pitts, no worser hand has been dealt to this young man in the form of the quarterbacks and what we've had here before. Let's take a quick look at his journey in Atlanta. I have some more folks in the chat, man. Tariq Johnson, what is going on? My brother, 30 Birds Central, Kev, Bro Talk, what's happening, brother? Hope all is well with you. April Thomas, what's going on, Ron? Hope everything is well with you as well. But without further ado, let's just look at what Kyle Pitts has done in his career for these Atlanta Falcons. And as we see here, absolutely bursted onto the scenes in 2021. Uh, Obviously, 1,026 receiving yards had in that year, that one touchdown that really a lot of us complained about in that year, and with a lot of reasons. And I just, before I go into that, I just want to clear something up too, man. Terry Fontenot gets a lot of cheap heat for drafting a guy like Kyle Pitts, but this pick here has all the makings and all the writings of an Arthur Smith pick. And if you don't believe me, man, go on and look at the Tennessee Titans offensive game plan in their scheme in 2020 and 2021 before well, actually 2020, where Arthur Smith used a heavy dose of a two tight end personnel, was the reason in that year in 2021 we drafted Kyle Pitts, and we also traded, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, for the services of John Smith to try and replicate what he had in Tennessee on here to the Atlanta Falcons. It didn't come to life, obviously, because we didn't have a run game. Mike Davis, I believe, was the running back at the time. So Arthur Smith was really trying to do too much with, a relative unknown still in the NFL ranks with Kyle Pitts. But you see the success, in that year. Very limited skill set players were had. Cordero Patterson. That's the year I believe Calvin Ridley decided to take a step away from football. Zacchaeus, Super Bowl, almost Super Bowl. Zacchaeus was on the roster. Oh, yeah, was on the roster at that time. And then you had Kyle Pitts. So Matt Ryan really dealing with the limited bag as far as skill set players. And you saw what you can have with a competent quarterback and a skilled player like Kyle Pitts, and the results were 1,026 yards. Now you fast forward into 2022. I felt like Kyle Pitts could have bursted onto the scene a little bit better. Had quarterback play obviously have been better. Marcus Mariota obviously taking over in that year for the departed Matt Ryan, but his season was cut short due to a knee injury, and later on that year, which limited him to just 10 games and 356 yards. But a lot of that year, you saw Kyle Pitts, and you saw a lot of what the reasons were behind him being drafted fourth overall. The explosion, the cut ability, the route tree running, just a very difficult tight end to get your hands on and jam. It just, like I mentioned, playing under Marcus Mariota, accuracy was going to be Achilles heel number one, man, and it proved so, man. A lot of the times in 2022, we saw the great separation that we miss seeing now. But when Pitts was, ripe and ready to go, we saw it. The connections couldn't haven't been made. Plenty of times, Kyle Pitts was able to get behind the defender. It just couldn't be delivered on target, man. For it just couldn't be done. Fast forward to 2023. Obviously the stats going up. Pitts is 1 year removed from the knee injury that he suffered, and he came back, and obviously 667 yards. The targets went back up. Obviously, that's in a year that we've already had a Drake London establishing himself within the offense. We had a first year running back in Bijan, who came as a jack of all trades, a receiving threat as well out of the backfield, not to mention his running abilities. But in that year, Kyle Pitts really just he couldn't separate himself, or he couldn't entrench his footing right within this offense. A lot of the times it was being asked to block, and it just left us Falcon fans just really scratching our heads as to what is the proper utilization of Kyle Pitts, man. And in that year, and in that 2023 year, sure, 667 yards. Hey, listen, they're decent stats, but so much hangs on his head because he was the fourth overall pick. So the expectations are always going to be higher than what the production looks on the field. But yeah, Pitts was able to, affect the game in different avenues, in defensive scheme speaking, like, safeties, drawing linebackers, drawing double coverage in certain windows, in certain areas or certain plays. Yeah, Kyle Pitts still had that ability in that respect around the league to command that. But we needed to see a little bit more from that, man. We needed better execution. And again, another year with shaky quarterback play. This was the year Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder were just flopping at the quarterback position. So yeah, up until this point, Kyle Pitts was just dealt a bad hand with the quarterback situation, right? Now, fast forward into this past year, right? This past year, we tampered with the likes of Kirk Cousins. We acquired the services of Kirk Cousins. Kyle Pitts was one of the ones to reveal that, and actually was one of the ones to reach out to Kirk. And with everything being shown in training camp, like I mentioned at the top of the stream, I felt like this was going to be Kyle Pitts' coming out party or exploding onto the scene for these Atlanta Falcons under a Zach Robinson scheme with Kirk Cousins, a competent quarterback, labeled that from the early start in Atlanta. Uh, and again, just it wasn't able to marry. It wasn't able to connect. It wasn't able to do a lot of the things that we felt as Falcons fans could have elevated Kyle Pitts to a different height within the position. And it sucks. It really does, because that 2021 draft will forever be held over our head as several missed opportunities that the Falcons currently have problems in now: edge position, offensive tackle position, hey, cornerback position. A lot of those guys in those respected skill set positions were available to be drafted. Hell, even wide receiver with Jamar Chase just being taken a um, a selection after Kyle Pitts. Now begs the question, right? What do we do with Kyle Pitts going forward? What if we as Falcon fans learned anything in 2024 is that Kyle Pitts is just not a fit for this Falcons offense. Sorry, man. You've had you this was the year if you were going to make a substantial impact on this Falcons offense, this would have been the year. You had the quarterback before he fell off the rails to go on and really establish yourself. And you really couldn't. Yes, sure. You had the game winning catch for the TD against the Washington Commanders. And that was via Michael Penix. But what did you do? What was your body of work beforehand? Before that Washington game, the only memorable game that I have for Kyle Pitts, and folks in the chat, you guys can let me know, man, was National Tight End Day. I believe it was week 8 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he exploded onto the scene, 91 yards or 92 yards, highest yard outputage since I think 2022, and 2 TDs. And that was it for Kyle Pitts, man. That was it. Most of the year just really served as just a role player within the offense. Um, I also think that comfortability and trust was an issue in this year in the early part with Kirk and Pitts, where I didn't feel like Kirk Cousins trusted Pitt's work ethic or his route running ability, which was deemed lazy and just just lazy pretty much a lot of the times. I don't think that Kirk really felt like he should be a part of his progressions, and it showed. Sometimes, Pitts would have been like either the fourth or fifth option or progression if progressions are had that late, where he just wasn't a factor in a lot of these games, man. So going into this offseason of 2024, and I'm gonna stop sharing this here right quick and just talk to y'all, man. Dirty Bird, what's going on, man? Hope all is well with you, bro. Do they trust him? I don't think that they could, man. Why are they scared to use Pitts? Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of great questions, man. I don't know. I don't really understand why they're afraid to use Pitts. I feel like in this, wide open 12 personnel, 11 personnel package that Zach Robinson has with these Atlanta Falcons, targets should come. We saw what Kirk Cousins was able to do with a talented tight end in TJ Hawkinson his last year in Minnesota. So why couldn't he replicate with that with Kirk Cousins? What's going on, Antonio? I just feel like it was a complete trust factor from beginning to end. I don't think that Kirk trusted him. And Penix hasn't played long enough to build a rapport with Kyle Pitts to even want to go into this next season and see if they can manifest something there. So clearly saying all that to say this, I think it's time really for the Falcons to just cut ties, take this L, and get rid of Kyle Pitts, man, and trade him. Where would you trade him? Right? There's several teams, there's several tight end needy teams. You can even revisit um Arthur Smith in Pittsburgh and see if there's something there. They got Pat Fairmouth, a talented tight end. But how would that Pittsburgh offense look with two dominant tight ends? And I say dominant because Pat, I think he's a pretty dominant tight end in his own right, pretty good pass catching tight end. Kyle Pitts could, match rate into something there in that scheme. So putting Pitts in black and yellow, would that interest Pittsburgh enough to pull the trigger? And we have to start looking at teams that might need a guy like Pitts. We need to shop his services. This is a Falcons team that goes into this draft with what I think five draft picks. A number one, a number two, a number four, and two number sevens. We lost a third round pick, or we traded our third round pick for Matthew Judon, which flopped. And we also got docked a fifth round pick and the tampering situation with Kirk Cousins, right? So we have to start looking at teams that have draft capital that might have a need. Ladarius Brown, what's going on, my brother? That have a need at that skill set position. So I think of teams like Pittsburgh. I'll think of the team like the Jacksonville Jaguars. You know, trade him, trade him back home to Jacksonville. Obviously, he has Florida ties, Florida roots coming from the Gators. Why not? Why not send him to a place where he's comfortable? He might need just a fresh change of scenery. To get his just to get his career back on track. He's only 24 years of age, and that's another enticing factor for these Falcons to dangle over on a team. But for me personally, if I'm trying to maximize what I can get out of Kyle Pitts as far as is in compensation, I look no further than the Denver Broncos, man. Denver Broncos with Sean Payton. Got to think about the early years with the Denver Broncos, and well, not just the Denver Broncos, but Sean Payton specifically when he had Jimmy Graham, how he was able to channel his offense right through Jimmy Graham, and he was able to utilize Robert Meacham and a lot of these receivers in a very positive way. So I think a guy like Pitts and Sean Payton could be a perfect marriage. And for the Falcons, dangling the age and dangling that, whatever that 2021 season still holds in these coaches' heads, if we could get a third round pick, that's a win for the Atlanta Falcons. If we can get a fourth round pick, I'm good with that. I'm good with that. My thing is, I don't want to go with Pitts going into 2025 and have him put up subpar production and just allow him to walk out of Atlanta with no guarantee coming back. Sure, there's a compensatory pick that could be had, but it's probably not going to be what we get for him now in trade value. We might just get a fifth or a sixth round pick. I'd rather capitalize and cash in now on what Pitt still has, or the respect that he still has around the league, more than anything. And trading him out of the NFC completely is a perfect start, and it's a start for him in the change of scenery factor. I think that Pitts needs that. I think that I think the bright lights of Atlanta proved to be too much for this reserved, shy kid. You don't really hear too much of Kyle Pitts. Zay in the bag, what's going on, brother? I really feel like, yeah, it's just time to just wash our hands with Kyle Pitts in this situation and send him packing. It just sucks, for the reasons mentioned. That's a much talked about draft with a lot of great skill set players: Micah Parsons, Penei Sewell, Patrick Surtain, yeah, Jamar Chase. So there was a lot of guys that could have been had, but needless to say, Falcons settled for Kyle Pitts. So you guys let me know what you guys feel, man, and what you guys think. Is trading Pitts now the best option for this Atlanta Falcons team moving forward into 2025? I, for one, I'm in that crowd of yes. I think it's time to just turn the page in the Kyle Pitts era and just get him out of here, out of Atlanta, and cash in on that. And also to mention, in this offense, his impact was really not, it wasn't really felt, man. It was minimal at best. I think we got more impact and production out of a guy like Ray McLeod, our third receiver, and we felt that and came up big and clutch in a lot of the games this year than we did a Kyle Pitts for 17 games out of this year. But yeah, so next topic that I want to talk about right quick also is moving away from the Kyle Pitts situation. Um, is is it time for the Atlanta Falcons to build the trenches in this defense correctly, man? Is it time? Is it time for the Falcons to look at what this 2025 draft offers is in regards to these defensive tackles that we have on hand? The King Esom, he says, I don't want a pick for Pitts. I want a player because we don't draft well at all. That's pretty bold, King. I feel like the Falcons, which I understand what you're saying, and you know, and this goes for any NFL team. Really, a first round pick is never really a full guarantee, and it's being shown that in the form of Kyle Pitts. But I feel like this Falcons team has drafted well this last year. We're just waiting on a lot of draft picks. You can look at the 2023 draft, and I think there's a lot of hits there. Clark Phillips, Zach Harrison, of course, Bijan Robinson this year. You know, out of all of the rookies that we took, you know, JD Bertan was the most surprise. He outsnapped and outplayed everybody from Penix to Rook to Brandon. Obviously, Braylon Trice we lost. So it's still a wait and see approach with this past year's draft class. But I felt like within this last two drafts, man, I think the Falcons did themselves better, or Terry did a better job at at drafting. 2021, 2022, kind of uh, here and there. Of course, 2021, like mentioned, 9 picks. I felt like the only hit in that draft class was Drew Dahlman, and he's a free agent this year. So hopefully the Falcons can make it right and bring him back. So I'll see what's going on, man. He said, "What up, Berto? Yeah, it's time to build this defense the proper way. Time to get back to being the dirty birds. Definitely got to look at into a tight end market." Zay in the bag says, yeah, we don't need we this offense doesn't need a tight end to put up splashy numbers. We have a number of other skill set players that can help with that. Sure, Bijan doing it all at the running back position. Tyler Algier, you know, still has something to say within this offense, and of course our outside guys in Darnell Mooney and Drake London. Trade back, we need more picks, says Tyreek Johnson. Yeah, absolutely. That it's a popular time for that. We currently hold the 15th overall pick. You know, you look at teams like actually, like just mentioned, the Denver Broncos who sit at 20. Uh, Talked about Pittsburgh. I believe they sit at 21 or 22, or that could be the LA Chargers. Trade back to one of those spots, and you can start looking at building this Falcons trench the right way. We have two aging defensive tackles that in this offseason, Terry Fontenot and this Falcons organization have a lot to, you know, sit down and think. One of them being, you know, just our I can't call him our Iron Man because that belongs to Jake Matthews, but the heart and soul to this Falcons defense since 2014 and Grady Jarrett. No one Falcon player has done as much for this Falcons team on and off the field as Grady Jarrett. Obviously, son of Falcons Hall of Famer, or should be Hall of Famer, Ring of Honor recipient, Jesse Tuggle. Grady Jarrett is the example of what a true Falcon is like. And the Falcons obviously have some tough questions. He has an elevated cap this going into this season, and so does his running mate David Omanyata, who took a step back within this scheme and really is a non-factor, I feel, going forward, and especially with this Jeff Ulbrich attack style defense that we're going to have. These are two aging players that unfortunately are not living up to the contract or the bill as they once did. And what this 2025 NFL draft offers is some dogs on the defensive line, man. If you witnessed the Senior Bowl this past week, so many prospects were coming through. What we're going through the Senior Bowl practices, and a lot of names that you haven't heard really made themselves some money, really elevated their draft stock, and really put themselves on a radar for a lot of NFL teams. And quite frankly, I feel like the Atlanta Falcons could or should cash in on either one or two of these guys that are coming out, man. It's time to start properly building these trenches or this defense the right way. This Falcons offensive line, if we can learn from any examples, got to look at the how the Falcons offensive line was built, which started in 2019 with Caleb McGarry, with Chris Lindstrom. You go to 2022 or 2021, I'm sorry, and you have Drew Dahlman. 2022 brought us Matthew Bergeron. So, the Falcons took their time building this offensive line, and I feel like that same energy needs to be put upon or thrusted upon this Falcons defensive line. This is a Falcons that team that you can't knock for trying, but they have tried since the departure of John Abraham. Bringing in guys like Rashid Hageman, bringing in guys like Vic Beasley, Tack McKinley, just guys that really just haven't panned out. So it's in this draft class. While a lot of these players don't give you those vibes of a Rashid or a Tack or a Zach, excuse me, or Vic Beasley, you got to start, investing in that. You can't turn a blind eye to the defense much longer. It has to be priority number one. I think the Falcons started that trend last year, picking up guys like Braylon Trice, and we all can't wait to see what that young man has to offer. The high motor kid out of the University of Washington, we drafted in the third round. We saw production out of Rook, but we got to remind ourselves Rook was a healthy scratch for the first 5 or 6 weeks. Brandon Dorlus was a healthy scratch for 10 to 11 weeks, and we saw some flash potential from Rook. We really didn't see too much from Brandon Dorlus. Also, within this draft or within this year's draft, there's a lot of guys that you can draft in the first round that will make an immediate impact, and you can pair with guys like Brandon Dorlus, a natural three technique guy that is that fits more to what Jeff Ulbrich is going to do. One gap control scheme and go. So guys like Brandon Dorlus, guys like Rook probably will look a whole lot better as far as draft picks under Jeff, more so than it was under Jimmy Lake. I think Jeff can utilize these guys a little bit better. So Rook and Brandon, they stand as day one winners, quote unquote, but the depth behind it and adding more pieces cannot be ignored on a year that also has guys like Taquan Graham that is a free agent. And before or up until he was injured this past year, Taquan Graham was having a pretty decent season. So do the Falcons elect to bring him back? He's still a young player. So there might be some attraction there in that sense. Eddie Goldman, the on and off again retired Eddie Goldman, came back, finally gave us a full year. But I think the Falcons, elect to look another way. Contavia Street, another guy who would fit the bill here in Atlanta. Is he going to come back? We traded with Philadelphia a couple years back for his services, and as a spot starter and as a rotational piece, yeah, he looked pretty good. Atlanta should definitely look at and into bringing a guy like Contavia Street back, who has starter capability and some starts under him to help just in case something happens. Damone Harris, James William Smith, two other guys that really the Falcons should look back at, look into bringing back. But I think that just looking at this interior group of guys, and I put up a quick list of guys that I noticed, man. Just want to share that with y'all right quick. Cool. So we see here, I think the biggest winner in the Senior Bowl week was Darius Alexander, defensive tackle out of Toledo, 6'4", 311 pounds, tremendous versatility and very scheme diverse. This is a guy that you can line up from the zero, which is right over the center, all the way to the five technique, which is the outside shoulder of either tackle, left or right. This is a guy that he's plug and play in my eyes, and a guy that really elevated his draft status this year. Very stout, guy that utilizes his hands very well. And in some cases, he looked unblockable in the Senior Bowl this past week. Plays with a lot of effort, a lot of power, has a great first step. This is a guy that really made money for himself and elevated his draft stock and to a team like the Atlanta Falcons. And the thing that sucks the most is we go into this year with limited draft picks, and that really is an eyesore because this would have been the year that the Falcons could have done some damage in the drafting portion, taking some of these guys that may be available in the second round, hell, even in the first round. There's a lot of options that the Falcons have. I know they're putting all their chips in the middle of the table in terms of, hey, we can't we can't overlook any scenario or any situation. uh Falcons do need to acquire more picks because we need more talent on this defense. Offense, I'm not too worried about, other than maybe maybe the right tackle position, but that's talking into the future. But right now, Falcons could have done some damage acquiring some of these players. But let's go back into it. Darius Alexander was the darling, really. One guy that really separated himself from everybody is Walter Nolan, man. The Ole Miss product, 6'3", 304 pounds. Reminds you a lot of, and I'm quoting him, Aaron Donald. And god damn it, he looked the part, man. An explosive first step, a la what Aaron Donald showed. I don't care about the hype because we lived in an era, we've seen an era where dominant defensive tackles, not in the 6'4", 6'5" frame, were available, and Aaron Donald was a 6'1" prospect. John Randall was that for the Minnesota Vikings back in the day, but Walter Nolan, fits that bill as an as an Aaron Donald prototype. Just an explosive first step, really a reek of, creature of habit, relentless motor, uses his hands very well. Another guy really that just was unblockable, and that was him going up against top tier talent, offensive talent and guard talent, really in the Senior Bowl. That I really enjoyed watching. Will he be available at 15? I don't know. This is a guy that may have played himself into that top 10 conversation, man. And of course, with the combine still some weeks away, these guys, Darius Alexander, Walter Nolan, could really elevate themselves a little bit more, with the cone shuttle, the three cone shuttle, their 40 speed, the split 20-yard, all of these things that really put these guys in that small box of area of quickness. And if they check the boxes, man, these guys are gonna skyrocket into that into that top 15, top 10, hell, or even top 8 conversation in the NFL draft coming up in April. Another guy that really helped himself was Aeneas Peebles out of Virginia Tech, 6'1", 290 90-pound defensive tackle. Just the guy is just quick, man. That's exactly what it is. He's a very smart defensive tackle, high IQ, man. Just high IQ. Change of direction was jumped out of the stream, or jumped out of the scenes at first, man. A good, true interior pass rusher, guy that lived in the backfield for Virginia Tech, and he put it on display this past week at the Senior Bowl. A good run stuffer, and it's odd to say for a guy that's 6'1", 290 pounds, man. The guy, that's a guy that elevated his draft stock. Probably elevated himself into a from a fourth or third round to maybe a second round grade. Now that the Senior Bowl is just about wrapped up, and then we got guys like Deon Walker, man, just a mammoth and bulldozer of a guy at 6'6", 344 pounds, out of the University of Kentucky. Now, this past year for the Kentucky Wildcats, Deon didn't really play to what Deon showed in 2023, where he had 7.5 sacks and was just a wrecking ball of a guy, man. He's another guy that is scheme versatile, and and you say you can ask yourself, or you can ask, 6'6", 344, the guy's he's like that, he has game like that. Man, let me tell you, go back and watch some of his tape and what he was able to do in 2023. And hell yeah, this is a kid that is a nimble, fleet-footed defensive tackle for his size and weight, has a basketball background, so agility and just, is nothing to this kid, man. This kid plays with a good motor. The problem that I have with the guy that's 6'6" is his pad level, and that's most common for defensive tackles of that height, man. We saw it with Rashid Hageman when we drafted him in the second round in 2014 out of Minnesota. But this guy is definitely worlds better and more, just more, oh man, more refined at the position of defensive tackle than Rashid was coming out. But Deion Walker, he's another playmaker. He only finished, I believe, with a sack and a half last year, or 3 sacks, something in that area. But he played the season with a lot of injuries, and you can tell he was limited this past year. So we have a brand new defensive line coach in Nate Ollie, and Nate Ollie was able to coach guys like Christian Covington, Damone Harris, and a lot of those guys were really able to experience their better pro seasons, under the guidance of Nate Ollie. So what that screams to me is a guy that tutors these young men and really holds them accountable at their position to maximize what they can do. So that's exactly what this Falcons defensive line needed, was a teacher of men. Gone is Jay Rogers, thank God. So enter Nate Ollie. So I would love to see, if drafted by the Falcons, what Nate Ollie can get out of a guy like Deion Walker with all this physical imposing, measures that he has at 6'6". And truth be told, this is a young man that, with the size and the makeup that he has, what the Falcons need on the defensive line is more size, more stoutness. This is a Falcons team for a very long time that has trotted out one of the lighter defensive lines in NFL memory. The last time I feel like we had any size was probably back in 2017, when the likes of Don Terry Poe was around, Courtney Upshaw was around. He blew up like a tick to kick inside. But that's the last real time that we had any true size, in this Falcons interior. So Deion Walker, is a guy also that just might add, or could add, a level of physicality and size to this room that it sorely has missed in a long time. And a guy like this, and I'm sorry to talk so much about Deion Walker, but I feel like a kid like him, you pair him next to a Rook or a Brandon, because of his skill set, this guy automatically is going to draw your double teams and put Brandon and put Rook in favorable one-on-one matchups. And if the three technique uh, situation, it comes to life in Atlanta, then we have two good ones in Rook and Brandon, who are incredibly quick at their first step and can get to the backfield quickly. We saw spurts of Rook when he was playing alongside David Onyemata and Grady. And the kid has something to say. The kid has good talent. So adding size is the thing for this Falcons defensive line. So looking at this, the interior, the defensive tackle specifically is an interest to me. It's something, or path the Falcons should take. For all the things mentioned in the beginning with David Onyemata, with Grady Jarrett, these guys, they're aging. These guys are cut candidates. Cutting these guys, I think, saves the Falcons anywhere from 24 to 26 million right off the bat, in the salary cap department. And I know that Grady, as much as he means to this Falcons organization, could be back on a team-friendly deal once it's all said and done. Business is business at the end of the day. But at the same time, you can't go into business without having something in return. And the return is right there in front of you in the form of these prospects that are coming in this NFL draft now in April, man. So those are some of the names, man, that just really struck a chord with me in the Senior Bowl, and just looking and just diving into film, and looking at these prospects that are coming up, man, I really feel like, it's a position of need for these Atlanta Falcons, and a lot of folks may disagree. Why are we looking at defensive tackle when we have 2 already? Yeah, but it goes beyond, the respect factor. It goes beyond into, knowing that we have them too. It's the production at the end of the day screams more, and there's a lot of value in this year's draft, man. So going right quick into the chat, man. I like Cincinnati as a trade destination for Kyle Pitts, says Ladarius. Absolutely, man. With Mike Gesicki's positioning with the Bengals, it's uncertain at the moment. It would fit the bill. You're right. It's a marriage right there. Kyle Pitts to the Cincinnati Bengals, and I believe some NFL experts have already made that correlation that that's a trade destination for Kyle Pitts if it happens. Deshaun Neek says at least the offense is set for a few years. Maybe trade for another wide receiver. I'm glad that you brought that up. Because I had a theory, and chat, you can agree to disagree. With so much uncertainty that is, revolving around the services of Kyle Pitts going into 2025. I have 2 questions. Do we as Falcon fans trust that Ray McLeod is going to put up the same amount of production that he did in 2024? Will he do the same in 2025? Or, as Deshaun asked, should we look to acquire another wide receiver? Now, I put this topic out on Twitter, and it took off. And it came in the form of Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp to the Falcons, to me, makes all the sense in the world. And folks agreed, disagreed, loved, liked, retweeted, dragged, said what they had to say, and I give them that. That's their opinion. It doesn't bother me. But when you think about it in the most logical sense, let's all do that for 1 minute, let's look at what an impact of a Cooper Kupp can have on these Atlanta Falcons. More importantly, Michael Penix Jr., right? You insert a guy like Cooper Kupp. So what does that do for Ray McLeod? Obviously, it knocks him down. It knocks him down. It relegates him to wide receiver number 4. The Falcons usually don't use five wide receiver sets often, but it's something that you can dabble with if Ray McLeod does move down the depth chart, right? The punt and kickoff return this year, by far for the Falcons, was ass. And Avery Williams, who's a free agent, should allow to just test waters or dive into those waters and not be allowed back in Atlanta because he's served 0 pop at that position. So you put a guy like Ray McLeod in there who predominantly was used in that role in that fashion in San Francisco before he came to the Atlanta Falcons. But you put a guy as Cooper Kupp in as wide receiver number 3, you get a savvy veteran who understands defenses, who understands what the Falcons are doing on offense, and coming from a Rams organization who runs a similar, skill set or in a similar scheme to what the Falcons are doing now with a lot of 11 and 12 personnel. Why not? And this is a kid that knows the Zach Robinson offense. He knows where he knows where to go. He knows exactly where soft, zones and defenses, and he'll know where to sit. So basically, bringing in a Cooper Kupp, we're not asking him to be wide receiver number 1. We're not asking him to be wide receiver number 2. We're just asking him to be a high-end role player as wide receiver number 3, who, oh, by the way, can play that number 1 spot, can play that number 2 spot, and, just create more matchup nightmares for guys like Drake and Darnell if the Falcons or Zach, gets in his creative bag and elects to put a Drake in the slot or Darnell in the slot and feature different varieties on the outside. That's what you want. That's exactly what we want, is more creativity in this offense. And oh, by the way, Michael Penix goes into this year, 2025, with only 4 games under his belt. You're gonna want to put your young quarterback in the best positions, obviously, but with guys that know what they're doing more so in year 2 with him, under him. A guy like Cooper Kupp can come in and tie every loose end to this Falcons offense. You get a veteran that understands the offense. You give Michael Penix a safety blanket at the wide receiver spot that we all figured and thought could have had with more time with Kyle Pitts, who, like I mentioned, there's uncertainty with his future in Atlanta. So for me, I'm all for Cooper Kupp coming into Atlanta. And a lot of people asked, "Oh man, he's gonna break the bank." No, man, no, he's not. Cooper Kupp will not break the bank in Atlanta, man. He might get a reasonable deal, but it's not gonna be anything exotic. He's not gonna command 12, 13 million for a year or two. He's not, man. I'm okay with giving him an incentive laden contract for just 1 year. Why not? With another year option, give it to him. The guy has earned it. So while Cooper Kupp's career with the Rams may be coming to a close, he might come here in Atlanta and just coast because we don't need him to be that do-it-all wide receiver that he was asked for so many years to be under the Rams. But Deshaun, I appreciate that question, man. Antoine Wartime, what's going on? James Vaughn, what is happening? A1 Forever asks, what do you think about the kid from LSU? D-line, can't remember his name, but he kept getting through the line in the second quarter. Out of LSU. I'll get back to you on that one, man. Dwayne Ruffin says he likes Nolan too. April Thomas Bird, do you think the Atlanta Falcons can get 2 draft picks from the Kyle Pitts trade? Sure. Yeah, you can get a future pick, but the more important pick is what you get for right now. So yeah, it's not out of the question that you can. Nolan is a problem. King Richie, what is going on? Deshaun says, try to sign Mack and draft Green or Pierce. Now, folks, man, yes, I love the Khalil Mack throw out right there. Sure, a guy that's high in age, 33, 34 years of age, but man, he's still doing it. He's still a creature of havoc. He's still a wrecking ball, man. So I would be completely fine with signing a guy like Mack and drafting a guy like Green or Pierce, man. If folks don't know who Mike Green is out of Marshall, man, just go and watch the tape, man. The kid's unbelievable. FBS leader in sacks last year, 17 sacks, man. The kid has an incredible bend, twitchy edge presence, has power, can convert speed to power. He's working on or as we saw, working on an arsenal of moves or a plethora of moves in the Senior Bowl. Had some great one-on-ones in the Senior Bowl and bested a lot of them. Mike Green is a guy that really elevated his draft stock this past week. And James Pierce, edge rusher out of Tennessee, a guy that has been heavily linked to the Atlanta Falcons, also, would look nice in a Falcons uniform as well, man. Mhm. T. Terry says Falcons need a center in the draft because Dahlman is going to have to leave. And unfortunately, T. Terry, you have a great, great point. Dahlman may have overvalued his worth or his stay in Atlanta. He might command something from 14 to 16 million, maybe a little bit more as a free agent. So if Terry and the organization really value Drew Dahlman, they're going to have to do some thinking, man, some real thinking in regards to bringing him back. And I think he should be priority number one in terms of our in-house free agency, which Falcons have 30 free agents, most of them on the defensive side. But Dahlman coming, the free agent from that 2021 draft, it going into next year, it just gives a cohesive unit for Michael Penix Jr. to still work with. All 5 offensive linemen working together and working with Michael Penix Jr. But drafting one also in the later rounds is also a possibility. But yeah, I'm real interested to see what the Falcons elect to do with Drew Dahlman, man. Let's get a wide receiver in the draft. There's a lot of great ones. There's a lot of good ones. You bring up a great name right here in Jimmy Horn Jr., who's been putting folks on skates. I believe he put Shiloh Sanders, man, on skates a couple of times in the East-West Shrine game. So, that's a name to watch is Jimmy Horn, man. But folks, man, just getting back into the swing of things, man. I appreciate everybody joining this afternoon. As always, thank you for the support, man. This is just a quick pop-up for me. Just wanted to get my thoughts out there into the YouTube world in terms of what the Falcons should do with Kyle Pitts and what the Falcons should entertain in doing in the draft along the trenches on the defensive side. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of prospects in this year's draft, and the Falcons should be like hawks. You should have a good hawk eye on what is going on in the trenches, man, because there's a lot of value in this year's draft. This is a loaded edge group. This is a loaded defensive tackle group, and in the edge world is where the Falcons solely miss. So I expect the Falcons to walk out of there with one, maybe even two edge presence when it's all said and done. Again, man, I appreciate everybody coming through. Thank you for your time. I'll give you your Sunday afternoon back. Again, thank you. And I will see you guys again very soon. Might be dropping a mock draft, a live mock draft. So I will let y'all know in time when that's going to happen. But until then, man, enjoy your Sunday, man. Again, this is your boy Berto, host of the 95 North Falcons Talk Show. If you haven't done so already, I would ask that you please hit that subscribe button and please hit that like and share on this video so it can get out there into the YouTube world and get this platform going. Until then, I'll talk to you guys soon, man. Peace, everybody.